Curious Case of the Nona Lisa. A Raven Darkblade Mystery. Chapter 1. Art imitates death, but nobody dies. The grand exposition of artistic grandness loomed before Detective Raven Darkblade like a metaphor for something that looms, possibly a loom itself, but more artistic and grand. The building was painted in Crimson City's signature color, which was definitely crimson, except it looked more burgundy in this light, or possibly mauve, or actually just red but fancy. Raven stood at exactly 6 feet 1 inch, or was it 5 feet 10 inches? His height depended on his confidence levels, which fluctuated like the stock market during a sneeze. His eyes, which were gray like storm clouds mixed with disappointment and a hint of last Tuesday, surveyed the scene with the intensity of someone who had definitely solved crimes before. Probably. Another art heist, he mused internally to himself in his mind. Even though he'd never worked an art case in his life and couldn't tell a Monet from a monkey. But he'd seen a documentary once. Or was it a commercial? Same thing, the museum was in chaos, which is like regular organization but backwards and screaming. Police tape surrounded the impenetrable gallery trademark, which had apparently been quite penetrable after all. The 47 security cameras, or was it 74? Numbers are hard. Stared uselessly at nothing, having recorded exactly 0% of the crime due to what the security guard called technical difficulties, and what everyone else called forgetting to turn them on. Detective Darkblade, a woman rushed toward him, her heels clicking on the marble floor like tiny hammers of urgency. She was either 35 or 55, depending on which angle you looked at and how much you believed in Botox. I'm Miranda Paints Badley, the museum's chief curator of curatorial chiefness. Raven noticed her name tag actually said Miranda Peterson, but he'd already committed to the other name in his mind. Tell me everything, Raven said, pulling out his notepad, which was actually just the back of a Chinese takeout menu. But professionalism was relative, like his height. It's terrible, horrible, artistically catastrophic, Miranda wailed, wringing her hands in a way that suggested she'd practiced in a mirror. The Nona Lisa has been stolen, replaced with, I can't even say it. Try, Raven encouraged discouragingly. A child's drawing, in crayon, or possibly marker. The experts are debating. They walked through the gallery, past paintings that were definitely important and expensive, though Raven couldn't have explained why, if his life depended on it, which thankfully it didn't, yet. The walls were that particular shade of white that museums use to make art look artier, or possibly to hide dirt, or maybe just because they got a bulk discount on beige paint and called it eggshell. Here, Miranda gestured dramatically at an ornate frame that had clearly cost more than most people's cars, possibly their houses. This is where greatness once resided. Inside the golden frame, instead of the priceless Nona Lisa, was indeed a drawing that looked like it had been created by either a very untalented child or a very talented goldfish. It showed a stick figure with a crooked smile, more of a smirk, really, and hair that might have been hair or possibly spaghetti. A speech bubble proclaimed, "I'm real," in what was definitely Comic Sans, the font of criminals and comic book stores everywhere. Tell me about the Nona Lisa, Raven said, pretending to take notes but actually doodling a small cat. It's Leonardo da Vinci's other masterpiece. Miranda explained, her voice taking on the tone of someone who'd given this tour too many times to too many people who didn't care. Painted on the same day as the Mona Lisa, a Tuesday or Thursday. Definitely a day ending in day. The subject was Nona Lisa, Mona's twin sister, who had a completely different smile. Different how? Raven asked, genuinely curious despite himself. Well, where Mona's smile was mysterious and enigmatic, Nona's was more sarcastic, judgmental, like she knew something you didn't and thought less of you for it. Art historians have debated its meaning for centuries. Professor Artemis Nosalot, from the University of somewhere important, wrote 17 papers on that smirk alone. And the painting's value? Priceless, worth at least $50 million, or possibly $50. The last appraisal was controversial. The appraiser died under mysterious circumstances, as did the next 16 appraisers. We stopped asking after that. Raven examined the crime scene with the thoroughness of someone who'd watched exactly one episode of CSI and spent most of it looking at his phone. The security system was state-of-the-art, assuming art was in a terrible state. There were laser grids that weren't turned on, pressure sensors that sensed nothing, and motion detectors that were themselves motionless. The theft occurred during last night's gala, Miranda continued, her voice climbing higher with each word like a soprano with a grudge. The night of 1,000 pretentious titles charity auction. We had 200 guests, or 500. The guest list keeps changing. The champagne was flowing, the canapes were small and confusing, and everyone was wearing those little masks that don't actually hide your identity but make you feel mysterious. And nobody saw anything? Raven asked, his detective skills finally doing something that resembled detecting. Well, there was the mime. The mime? Pierre Silentworth. He was performing in the Impressionist wing. Very avant-garde. He was mining the sound of silence, which is ironic on several levels. But during the performance, several guests reported seeing suspicious figures near the Nona Lisa. Suspicious how? They were carrying what appeared to be art supplies, wearing berets. One might have been humming the Pink Panther theme. You know, suspicious in a very obvious way that nobody suspected because it was too obvious. Raven's mind raced like a turtle on a treadmill. Lots of movement, very little progress. This case was already more complicated than his usual work, which mostly involved finding lost cats that weren't actually lost, just hiding under beds. I'll need a list of everyone who attended the gala, he announced with authority he didn't possess. Of course. I have it right here. Miranda produced a list that seemed to change length every time he looked at it. Though I should mention, some of these names might be fake. We had a lot of art collectors who value their privacy. Mr. Steele's artwork, for instance, insisted that was his real name. Seems legit, Raven said, because sarcasm was easier than actual detective work. Oh, and you should know, Miranda added, lowering her voice to a whisper that wasn't actually quiet. There's been talk of a curse. A curse? Raven's eyebrows did their independent dance, one going up while the other stayed skeptical. Everyone who's authenticated the Nona Lisa has died, mysteriously. Well, except for one, but he's very nervous and refuses to leave his house, or look at art, or use the letter N. It's made his life quite difficult. Just then, a security guard waddled over, his uniform suggesting he'd been hired more for his ability to fill a chair than chase criminals. His name tag read Gary Sleepsalot, which Raven hoped was a nickname but suspected wasn't. "Detective," Gary wheezed, out of breath from the 10-foot walk. "I just remembered something about last night." "You were awake?" Miranda asked, genuinely surprised. "For a minute, between my 9 p.m. nap and my 9:15 p.m. snooze. I saw someone near the Mona Lisa. Tall person. Or short. Medium maybe. Definitely a height. Wearing all black. Or was it navy? Colors are hard at night." "Did you see their face?" Raven asked hopefully. "Oh yes. It was a face-shaped face. With features. Eyes probably. A nose, most likely. Standard face stuff." Raven sighed deeply. The sigh of a detective who'd chosen the wrong career, but was too stubborn to admit it. The museum was full of suspects, 200 of them, or 500. The number kept changing like his height, which was now 5 feet 11 inches, because he was standing on a slightly raised tile. "Don't worry," he told Miranda with confidence he manufactured from thin air and desperation. "I'll find your painting, and your thief, and possibly your mime, who seems to have disappeared." "Oh, Pierre always does that," Miranda waved dismissively. "He's very committed to silence. Sometimes he doesn't show up for work, and when we ask why, he just..." She made exaggerated mime gestures that communicated nothing. As Raven prepared to leave and pretend he knew what to do next, he noticed something odd about the forgery. In the corner, barely visible unless you squinted and tilted your head and believed really hard, were tiny letters. A T. "Initials," he muttered, his detective brain finally detecting something. "Oh, that's just how the forger signed it," Gary said helpfully. "Very considerate of them. Not many criminals sign their work these days. Lost art, really. Like the Nona Lisa." "Huh." Nobody laughed. "I'll be in touch," Raven said, which was detective speak for, "I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'll figure it out, probably maybe." As he left the grand exposition of artistic grandness, Raven couldn't shake the feeling that this case was going to be different. More complicated, more confusing, more likely to involve mimes. He was right about everything, except the important parts. But first, he needed coffee, and a real notepad, and possibly a book about art, so he could pretend to know what a Nona Lisa was supposed to look like. The case of the Nona Lisa had begun, and somewhere in Crimson City, which looked burgundy in this light, a thief was probably laughing at their own joke. I'm real indeed. To be continued. Artistically. Author's note. This chapter is dedicated to all the museum security guards who definitely stay awake during their shifts, and to Comic Sans, a font that deserves better than being used by criminals. Any resemblance to actual art heists is purely coincidental, and please don't steal the Mona Lisa's fictional twin.